On the night of November 24th, 1971, a cold, freezing rain was hammering the tarmac of Portland International Airport. It was Thanksgiving Eve. The terminal was packed with people rushing home to their families. In the middle of the crowd, a man in a dark business suit and a black tie walked up to the Northwest Orient counter. He bought a one-way ticket to Seattle. The name on his ticket was simple: Dan Cooper. He boarded Flight 305, sat in seat 18C, and ordered a bourbon and soda. He didn't look like a criminal. He looked like an executive. He was polite. He was calm. And he waited until the plane was in the air before he made his move. He handed a small, folded note to the flight attendant, Florence Schaffner. She thought he was just another lonely businessman trying to give her his number, so she dropped it in her purse without looking. Cooper leaned forward and whispered 8 words that would change aviation history. "Miss, you better look at that note. I have a bomb." 4 hours later, he would lower the rear stairs of the jet and jump into a freezing storm with $200,000 strapped to his chest. He was never seen again. This is the story of the only unsolved skyjacking in American history. Florence Schaffner unfolded the note. The handwriting was neat, all capital letters. It read, "I have a bomb in my briefcase. I will use it if necessary. I want you to sit next to me." Florence didn't scream. She walked back to row 18 and sat down. She asked him if he was bluffing. Cooper calmly unclasped his briefcase and opened it just enough for her to see. Inside were 8 red cylinders and a battery wrapped in wire. It looked real. He looked at her and said, "No funny stuff." Cooper told her to go to the cockpit with his demands. He didn't want political prisoners released or a manifesto published. He wanted something simple: $200,000 in negotiable American currency, specifically $20 bills. And he wanted 4 parachutes. But here is the strange part. While the pilots were radioing the FBI and the authorities were scrambling on the ground, Cooper wasn't sweating. He wasn't yelling. He ordered a second bourbon. He even tried to give Florence a tip for her trouble. The other 36 passengers on board had no idea they were being hijacked. Cooper told the crew to keep it quiet. To the passengers, the delay was just a minor mechanical issue. Cooper sat there in his dark sunglasses, smoking cigarettes, looking like the calmest man in the world. At 5:39 p.m., the plane landed in Seattle. The FBI was waiting on the tarmac. They had the money. They had the parachutes. But Cooper had one final instruction: keep the lights off in the cabin. He didn't want the police snipers to get a clear shot. The plane taxied to a remote section of the runway, far away from the terminal. Cooper demanded that a fuel truck pull up immediately. He knew that as long as the plane was being fueled, the FBI couldn't storm the aircraft without risking a massive explosion. A stairway was rolled up to the plane. An airline employee ran up the steps and handed over a knapsack. Inside were 10,000 $20 bills, random serial numbers recorded by the FBI on microfilm. The bag weighed 22 pounds. Then came the parachutes. The FBI initially tried to give him military-grade chutes, but Cooper refused them. He demanded civilian sport parachutes with manually operated ripcords. He knew exactly what he was doing. A military chute falls too fast for a novice. He needed control. Once he checked the gear, Cooper kept his word. He ordered the flight attendant to open the door and let the passengers go. 36 people walked off that plane completely unharmed. Most of them still didn't realize they had just been hostages in a high-stakes hijacking. But the ordeal wasn't over for the crew. Cooper ordered the pilot, the co-pilot, the flight engineer, and one flight attendant, Tina Mucklow, to stay on board. He told them to get back in the cockpit and prepare for takeoff. As the fuel truck drove away, Cooper gave the pilot a strange flight plan. He didn't want to go to Russia or Cuba. He said, "Fly south toward Mexico City, keep the landing gear down, and keep the altitude below 10,000 feet. They were flying low and slow into the dark. At 7:40 p.m., Flight 305 took off again. But this wasn't a normal flight. The landing gear was down. The wing flaps were set to 15 degrees. The plane was flying agonizingly slow, only 170 knots. It was barely staying in the air. Inside, the cabin was unpressurized and freezing cold. Cooper ordered the flight attendant, Tina Mucklow, to go into the cockpit and close the door. As she walked away, she saw him tying the money bag to his waist. That was the last time anyone ever saw Dan Cooper. Cooper had chosen the Boeing 727 for a specific reason. It was the only commercial jet with a rear staircase that could be lowered during flight. He knew exactly how the mechanism worked. He was alone in the back of the plane, and he was getting ready to leave. At 8 p.m., a red warning light flashed on the dashboard in the cockpit. The rear door had been unlatched. The captain asked over the intercom, "Is everything okay back there?" There was no answer. The stairs lowered into the roaring wind. The temperature outside was 7 degrees below zero. The storm was raging. Cooper stood on the bottom step, looking down into the black void of the Washington wilderness. He didn't have a helmet. He was wearing a trench coat and loafers. At exactly 8:13 p.m., the pilots felt a sudden bump in the cabin pressure. The tail of the plane jumped upward. It was the recoil of a 180-pound man pushing off the stairs. Cooper was gone. He had jumped into a thunderstorm over some of the roughest terrain in the United States, carrying a parachute he hadn't checked and a bag of money weighing 20 pounds. He had committed the perfect crime, if he survived the fall. As soon as the sun rose, the FBI launched the most extensive manhunt in the history of the Pacific Northwest. 1,000 soldiers, FBI agents, and local police combed the woods of southern Washington. They searched every inch of the predicted landing zone. They expected to find a body, or a parachute, or at least the money bag. But after weeks of searching, they found absolutely nothing. It was as if Dan Cooper had vanished into thin air before he even hit the ground. The only physical evidence he left behind was on the plane. In seat 18E, agents found a black clip-on tie and a pearl tie clip. Cooper had taken it off before he jumped. For decades, this tie was just a piece of fabric, but recently it became the key to the entire mystery. We'll get to that in a minute. The case went cold. Dead cold. For 9 years, not a single bill from the ransom money showed up in circulation. The FBI assumed the money was lost forever. Until February 1980. An 8-year-old boy named Brian Ingram was digging a fire pit on the banks of the Columbia River at a place called Tana Bar. 2 inches below the sand, he found 3 bundles of cash. Rotting, waterlogged $20 bills. The FBI confirmed the serial numbers immediately. It was Cooper's money. But there was a problem. They only found $5,800. Where was the rest of the $200,000? The discovery at Tana Bar deepened the mystery. The money was found 20 miles away from where Cooper supposedly landed, and the rubber bands holding the bills together were still intact. Rubber bands dissolve quickly in the elements. This suggested the money hadn't been there since 1971. Did Cooper bury it there later? Did it wash downstream? Or did he drop the money during the jump and survive to walk away empty-handed? The river gave up the cash, but it refused to give up the man. Over the last 50 years, the FBI has investigated over 1,000 suspects. From deathbed confessions to crazy conspiracy theories, everyone wants to be D.B. Cooper. But there are 3 names that stand out above the rest. First, there was Richard McCoy. Just 4 months after Cooper jumped, McCoy hijacked a United Airlines flight and jumped out over Utah with $500,000 using the exact same method. The FBI caught him 2 days later. He matched the description perfectly, but he had an alibi for the night of the Cooper jump. McCoy later died in a shootout with the FBI after escaping prison. Was he the copycat, or was he the original? Then there was Robert Rackstraw, a Vietnam War veteran, a pilot, and an explosives expert. He had the skills to survive the jump. When reporters asked him if he was Cooper, he would just smile and say, "I'm not saying I am, and I'm not saying I ain't." He took the secret to his grave in 2019. But the biggest break in the case didn't come from a suspect. It came from the tie. In 2011, a team of scientists used an electron microscope to analyze the clip-on tie Cooper left on seat 18E. They found over 100,000 particles of rare earth metals. Specifically, they found pure, unalloyed titanium. In 1971, this was incredibly rare. It wasn't found in kitchen utensils or car parts. It was only used in high-tech aerospace engineering facilities. This suggests that D.B. Cooper wasn't a drifting criminal. He was likely an engineer or a manager at a plant like Boeing. He didn't just know how to jump. He helped build the planes he was jumping from. In July 2016, after 45 years of hunting, the FBI officially suspended the investigation into the D.B. Cooper case. They stated that the resources were needed elsewhere. It remains to this day the only unsolved case of air piracy in commercial aviation history. But while the file is closed, the legend is very much alive. D.B. Cooper became an American folk hero. He didn't hurt anyone. He was polite to the crew, and he managed to steal a fortune from the system and vanish into the night without a trace. Did he die in the freezing woods that night, his bones buried under 50 years of pine needles? Or did he hike out, launder the money, and live the rest of his life watching the news, laughing at the world from behind his dark sunglasses? The FBI says he didn't make it, but they never found a body. And until they do, Dan Cooper is the man who beat the house. What do you think happened to D.B.? Cooper? Let me know your theory in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this mystery, make sure to subscribe. I'll see you in the next file.